All right, we should be live on YouTube right now, and I will just make sure that Jeffrey knows. I'll just tell him quickly. Hey, Jeffrey, so we're on Zoom now. You know where to go, right? Just look, if you look at it's bit.ly/CoronaTV after show. If you just punch that into your browser, it will open up Zoom. I just sent that to you in the chat. All right, I'll see you now. All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello, Joseph.
Hello, Tom. We'll wait for our guest. There he is.
Great.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Yeah, perfect.
And what a great show today. Jeffrey, this was like drinking out of a fire hydrant for an hour. I mean, man, you are so full of good ideas.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you. This is my third show, and I'm doing a presentation tonight for 150,000 people online. So it's going to be yeah. That's a big keynote.
Yeah, it's amazing what we can do now that we're remote, you know.
It's the live streaming with the video is just it is amazing, and it works out really well. It's been great.
We had a guy on the show yesterday who was coming to us live from a small island off the coast of Brazil.
Oh,
and
wow.
So it just gives you that sense that at this one time when we're so far apart from each other, we're so close together, ironically, at the same time, you know?
Yeah, you wish you know, the one thing I wish we could do is all be on the same time zone. It'd be a lot easier.
Yeah, that's the truth, isn't it?
We have a lot of members in our C-suite, you know, from South Africa, from Norway, from England, from Ireland, from Australia. And, you know, just to pick the times, it's a problem. It's a problem.
Yeah, I bet.
And an occasional Swede.
Occasional Swede. Yeah.
So 150,000.
Yeah. Yep.
How do you find? Have you ever even come close to that number?
The biggest was I think 40 or 80,000 that I did in a stadium once in Mexico City. And I did a big, huge, multi-level marketing group, and I spoke, and that was like massive, you know. And to speak and I spoke in the, you know, you speak in the round when you do that kind of thing, and that was big. And that was a live presentation, and of course that was also translated too at the same time. So
that's crazy.
And it was translated in like 60 languages or something. It was a massive amount of languages. Because it was there, you know, it was like an Amway convention for these guys, and so that was big. Yeah, I like big crowds.
Yeah.
When you're doing it online, it's you know, you're online, so it's not like you're you know, it's not like you get the feedback. You don't hear the soundtrack. You don't, you know, you're talking to a camera. You're telling your jokes, and you don't know if they're landing or not. You know, so but if you know your stuff well enough, you just punch through that. And that's sometimes a difficult thing as a speaker, because that's why I like live crowds and being in front of them, because you build off that audience, you build that, you know what you're doing. And you can use that. You can use the energy to back them off, bring them forward, you know, bring the sound to, you know, to a pin drop to bring it back up. And I do like that, you know, a great deal.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy to think, just, you know, there you are in, was it North Dakota or South Dakota?
South Dakota, yeah.
So you're in South Dakota in a room, bales of hay, you know, outside or whatever's outside. And I mean, that number, like, we all live this, right? This whole virtual world, we all get this, we're speakers, authors, but just the ability to suddenly be in front of 150,000 is just, it's mind blowing.
Well, I mean, but, you know, when I did live TV, like the finale of Celebrity Apprentice, we had 18 million people watching. So, you know, live, when you're doing that was a live show. So
no pressure.
And yeah, it's, you know, during the first, it's a 2-hour special when they do that. And the first hour and 45 minutes. I'm not part of it. And I'm in my dressing room on the set of Saturday Night Live. And I'm in the dressing room, and Trace Adkins is sharing it with me. And, and we're talking, and then he's got to go out, and then I'm on during this one block. So then they get me ready, bring me out, and I'm sitting in the floor waiting to go up, and I'm sitting next to Ivanka Trump. And then next to her was Jared Kushner, which I didn't know Jared at the time, but they introduced me as a fiance at that time. And then I remember I had to go to the bathroom really bad. So I rushed to go to the bathroom, and they're about to take me up. So they're freaking out because they're waiting, because I'm going to go live. And then, they put you up on stage and get me on my mark. And there's Trump and Ivanka and Jimmy Kramer over here, because they're the judge on that side. And then I'm over here, and then they put Gene Simmons up next to me. So he was in Japan. So they bring him in by satellite, and then I got to do my line or two, which I don't know what my line's going to be yet, because you don't know what it is, right? So it's live, but you gotta hammer it. And so the big thing was Gene Simmons was very upset that he got fired when he thought he was right, and he thought I was wrong. And, he was this big marketing guru, and who's this guy? I've got more experience than this guy, kind of thing. So that was what the whole thing was about. And then I remember Trump called on me and said, well, hey, Jeff, what do you have to say about that? And I said, well, let's just put it this way, Donald. He got fired. I doubled sales. Who was right and who was wrong? So boom, it was like, that was my line. Okay, fuck you, but that was fun.
I love the story.
Yeah, it's a true, absolutely true story. And then Gene and I became friends, as much as you could become friends with Gene.
So you just can't be intimidated, obviously, in that environment. You've just got to it's funny how you're with an audience of 1 or 2 or 3 that is being viewed by millions. And I think that's enough to make any confident, resolute person quake in their boots.
To think you don't get nervous, come on. To think you don't have little voices in your head or whatever, you just got to stop listening to them. I mean, that's the thing you have to do, You still have the voices in your head, no matter how successful you are. I mean, you got to, if you're, Tom Brady, he's got voices in his head, right? You're not going to make that pass. You're not going to make that pass. And he just has to shut them off, and that's what you have to do. You have to learn, somebody, I mentioned this on your show, Joseph, that, some of these celebrities, I was with a group of celebrities that were talking about how to master their brand. All right. They had one of the big, talent agencies through this big meeting for some pretty big megastars, and they were talking about how to monetize their brand. And so I was in there speaking with them, and that was one of the questions. They said, well, Jeff, don't you ever get those voices of doubt that say you can't do it, and my comment back to him was, well, sure, but I just stopped listening to those voices a long time ago. To say that, I said, you're a big star, you're this, you guys are this, you're this. I got, I don't know about you, but I got to go to the bathroom before I go up on stage. I get nervous, just like everybody else, but then boom, the action, you got to hit the mark, man. That's your job. That's what you do. And you don't want them to see you sweat. Don't want them to see you get nervous. Just fucking go do it. And that's what we have to do. It's game time, and I just think that's what we have to kind of learn. The more you do it, the better it gets, right? But it still it never goes away. The doubts never stop. I mean, without question. Come on, they never. But you have enough experience to know you can push through it. Do you doubt yourself? Hell yeah. Am I going to fail? Yeah. Somebody asked me the other day, what's your biggest mistake? I said, I don't know. I haven't done it yet. Meaning I'm going to do it. There's a bigger one. Whatever, I had a big one before. Fuck, I'll have another big one.
Yeah, it is interesting how we have to learn these mind games almost. I mean, in my own life, the only 2 times I've ever been really afraid was my first 2 times on live television. One was Regis and Kathy Lee, and one was Today's Show. Right after that, Today's Show, and the Regis thing, I couldn't sleep the night before until suddenly an idea occurred to me. I said, I was a professor at Notre Dame at the time, and I said, this is Regis's day job. I had gotten to know him. His daughter was in my class at Notre Dame. I said, he's comfortable. He's as comfortable on this show in front of millions of people as I am in my classroom at Notre Dame. So I'm going to borrow some of Regis's comfort today, and I'm just going to make that my own. I'm just going to pretend like this is my natural environment, the way it's his natural environment. You know, I'm in his home. I'm going to make it my home today. And
Totally.
that kind of taking ownership like that just kind of changed my attitude entirely. So in the rest of my career, you know, I was a professor, and then I became a public philosopher. And the rest of my career, whenever there's a big new group of people or a big new TV show or something, I do the same kind of tricks. And it's amazing how, rather than saying to yourself, I'm getting nervous, you say to yourself, I'm getting ready. And you know you're going to use that energy to do something great with it. So I mean, it's good to hear your stories about that too.
I have another interesting kind of build on that, which is, you know, television is so tough and it's so specific. You know, the idea of, for example, you can see when someone's had media training or not, when they're on, you know, they have a 3-minute segment. Whomever is interviewing them is going to be like 20 more seconds, 50 more seconds. Everything has to be a sound bite, and everything has to be beyond succinct. And, you know, I've just looked at this whole thing, and it's not natural. It's not normal. That's not how we talk. That's not how we interact. This Zoom after show is about as normal and natural as we are. And, you know, and if this were Corona cocktails or Sunday night, you know, I'd have my scotch with me as well. And so I think also what, you know, like what I've chosen to do as well is be in my comfort zone. Why should I be in a discomfort zone if I can help it? I've created my own safe comfort zone. Not to say that I wouldn't want to be on television or CNN or whatever the case may be. But it's just, I've like looked at it now, and instead of fearing it, I've almost, I don't want to say I despise it, because that's not fair or accurate. I've just chosen not to have to covet it, because, you know, to Jeffrey's point, Jeffrey, to your point, what Tom was saying, I know that I would be an absolute mess the night before. I wouldn't sleep. And I actually, you know, when I was promoting my first book, I was on ABC World, you know, whatever it was, the morning show, like at 5. And I just remember, I mean, you guys are going to laugh at this because you've all done it many times as well. The studio is like a football field, and there's this tiny little desk, and they put you on these unbelievably uncomfortable, weird chairs where you don't even know where to put your feet. And it's freezing cold. And you're like, just get me out of here. And just, you know, all I remember saying to myself when I did that first television appearance is, don't puke, because I figured that was inevitable, that I was going to vomit.
That's good. That's good advice for all of us, I think.
That's a good thing. And most things in life, you could pretty much use that one.
Well, just don't puke.
Let me jump in. I don't want to forget.
I gave you guys the Scotch Sunday invite in the thing there. So if you're interested, click on it and register.
I got to ask a philosophical question. Can I ask a philosophical question?
Sure.
All right, good. Because you brought something to mind today in a new way for me. When we're thinking about brand, and we're thinking about celebrity, those two things, very interesting and interestingly connected sometimes. They can both be sources of great power for good. A lot of people don't understand that. You know, it's not just a matter of me building my brand so I can make more money, me trying to add a measure of celebrity to what I do so I can build my, you know, kingdom. No, it's about having power for good. And yet the challenge is always to navigate that without self-absorbed grandiosity.
Yeah, it's
right.
Tough. That's a tough thing to do.
So many people.
What, like Trump?
Yeah, right. Exactly. We see so many people who don't navigate that well. So it occurred. I started working on a book on this about 10 or 15 years ago, because I started asking myself the question: why do so many smart and talented people do so many stupid things? I was reading Mary Shelley's book Frankenstein, and so here's this brilliant guy, Victor Frankenstein, who sets a massive goal. He's going to do something no scientist has ever done. And he says to himself, I'm going to be famous forever. I'm going to have glory forever. And that's what it's all about. And so in reading that story, I came to realize what really matters. Donald Trump goes in one direction, you go in another direction. And it's all about motives, methods, and means. If you have the wrong motives behind your brand building, if you have totally self-absorbed, narcissistic, grandiose motives, then the same methods and means that could work for such good are going to create
Well,
such
at the
harm.
core of that, though, Tom, is their values, and it comes
Yeah,
from their values
right.
of how they were brought up or the way in
You're
which.
absolutely right.
To hear the comments that have been said about Trump, I know Trump, and he's a friend of mine, and by the way, you look at his children, you think of all the kids that should be the most screwed up in the world, and they're not. So there's something there, right? The problem is you hear what his sister says about him, you hear what his own mother said about him. I mean, there's all that kind of thing. So if you, at the core of it is the value. So if you miss out on that, unless you had something that's shaken you in your core, then it's tough for you to ever realize that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you've, fallen to the bottom or you were addictive and sunk to the bottom and then had to reawaken, reborn, I think it's tough for people to do that. I think it's really tough. Yeah. So power is power, right? You can use power for good, power for bad. Now, who am I to say what's good and bad? Well, I'll base it on my own values. But my belief is Kevin Spacey of all people said when you get to the top, you have to remember to send the elevator back down for everybody else. And I think that's a great quote. That's a great comment. It says a lot, and that's the way you should be using. It's like I heard Jon Stewart today is now doing some things with these veterans, and I'm going, wow, this guy doesn't need to do that, but he's doing it, and Gary Oldham and some others that are doing it, and they just do these things for the right reasons. Well, why? You go back and look, man, their parents probably had a good upbringing with those guys. They had a good core values. They developed a good sense of themselves. And hey, you didn't get here because you're so smart. You got here because of luck and a lot of other factors that helped you get that. And so your job is to send the elevator back down.
Yeah. And that's something we don't see often enough,
Well, I mean, come on. I mean, I say this and I've said this publicly. I know I probably didn't say it on this show. I was in this earlier show is about sustainability and conscious leadership. And I mean, let's imagine the CEO of a major corporation and you do really well and you have a major exit or you have a major windfall. Do you deserve all that money? Do you deserve 200x of what the normal employee lives?
Right.
Is it because you're that fucking smart? No, not at all. So why so I have a real tough time not sharing that.
Yeah. You go back to the 50s and the 60s and the CEO, the salary differences between the CEOs and the frontline people was so different from what it is now.
Look,
right?
We are going through this change, and one thing that I've been saying is normally they say hindsight is 2020, except in 2020 when we're in it and we recognize we're in it. It's one of those. I find this year is an out of body year where we can actually almost look back and see what's happening, and we can actually recognize it as it's happening. Whereas for the most part, we have to in our rearview mirror be able to say, well, if I only had and should I, and I didn't realize at the time. But even yesterday, Bob Wollheim was saying that even the concept of leadership is shifting from the autocratic, dictatorial, powerful, parochial, whatever the case may be, to the idea, and he used the concept of a Sherpa or a guide. But it takes a very confident and self-confident leader to send the elevator back down and
but we also have to have people around people enough to say that's not acceptable behavior. Look at what's going on in San Francisco right now. The property values are going to be the highest in the world. And they're displacing normal everyday business people, displacing people who can't live in the city anymore. They can't live there. They can't afford. Even the people that work for some of the best companies in those companies can't afford to live in the city. There's something wrong with that.
Yeah.
And they have a responsibility to fix some of that because they caused it.
Yeah.
And so while you're making 100 million a year or a billion, okay, you have a responsibility to fix that shit.
Yeah.
And not build a 50,000 square foot home, and displace some more people out somewhere else. I'm sorry. I'm a capitalist. Let's be very clear. but you also, you have to think about this long term. I mean, you drive through San Francisco right now and you see the homeless problem that they have there. And not just a problem there. They got people shitting all over the streets and everything else. They got problems there and some of those people shouldn't be home. They should not be homeless. And I'm sorry, you know, why don't you cash in a jet and go help fix some of the problem?
Yeah.
You know, and there's just certain things I think you should do. You just don't need to live like that. So.
Yeah, Sam, I live here.
This conversation, by the way, with Buffett the other day, and another person in Omaha. We were talking, who was one of the biggest wealth companies in the world, and I had him on my show, and then afterwards he called Buffett, and they both called me because we were talking about this. I just said, look, we got to do something. Something's got to be done about this stuff. We can't operate like this.
Yeah. Joey, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I live here in San Francisco, and good to see you, Jeffrey. We hung out at iMedia years ago.
I remember. I remember your name. I remember you, Joey.
So good to see you again. Yeah, I think the San Francisco problem is real. I've lived here for 30 years, so I've seen it, you know, change. And the homeless population has gotten bigger and bigger. And then because of COVID, it's gotten even worse.
Yeah.
The tent cities are everywhere. And it's a problem. It's a public health problem. It's a mental health problem. And there's just myriad articles on what to do about it, you know, from the state government, from the federal government. And it really all goes back to what you're talking about is people just sharing. The charitable piece needs to be part of that solution. And it hasn't actually taken shape yet. And then the idea around, they talked about homes. So like these little cool homes that you can build with 3D
Tiny
printers
homes,
almost. Yeah. And so they interviewed a bunch of these folks and said, if we put you in a home, would that make it better? And they said, well, I could be there, but then I still have to go out and look for my drugs, or I still have to go out and look for my folks because I need to be around the community in which I live in. So there's addiction and there's mental illness and there's
a whole bunch of other issues.
It's such a complex problem that, I don't, and then the only good news on all of this COVID thing is that rents have come down almost 20%.
Yeah, that's well, but at the same time, let's be clear. You walk down the street and every third home is about to be foreclosed because they're not making their payments.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that yet. I'm sure it's happening.
Oh, it's coming.
Yeah, it has to, because it's
you're watching
crazy.
Now where the landlords aren't being as forgiving as they were before.
Yeah.
Now they're saying, nope, not letting you out of your lease. I mean, look, I've been in my New York apartment since February.
Yeah.
And I pay more for my New York apartment, that tiny little New York apartment, than I do for my farm. So it's nuts.
You know, it's all about, Jeffrey, what you were saying about values. I mean, a lot of people don't know that Adam Smith, before he wrote The Wealth of Nations, studied values for years and wrote a book about virtue before he published the book about capitalism. And capitalism is not supposed to be a Frankenstein monster out of control doing harm in the world. Capitalism is supposed to be an engine of great good for us, but we got to do it based on the right values. So I'm glad you said that about, the values matter. And they don't teach you this in business school. I mean, there'll be a business ethics course, which is kind of, you got to salute the flag, but it's not integrated into the training of leaders. And it's a real shame.
Yeah, totally.
Well, the invisible hand actually didn't understand that we were going to have multinational corporations that had tentacles into 120 different companies with regulatory boards that are all completely different. And how that's going to affect, because he had this wonderful notion, almost Pollyanna, about the institution of banking, right? He didn't see the whole Glass-Steagall. He didn't see all the stuff that was going on. He didn't see like investment banks now are commingled with commercial, how that's going to work as far as dividing up all the different pieces and property. I think Adam Smith would be shocked at what he sees, what we are today.
I just think it's amazing. I mean, hearing it from you, Jeffrey, but I've been keeping a little list. It's not even, separate from the business roundtable. But, whether it's people like Professor Philip Kotler or Mark Bertolini or Mackie, the founder of Whole Foods, it's almost an overwhelming consensus coming from business leaders now, which is there has to be a better way that doesn't have to and doesn't require us to, you know, to check our capitalism at the door.
Right.
The one example that I remember was Abigail Disney, one of the Disney heiresses,
Yeah.
you know, called out, who was it? I always confuse it, Iger, right? Who's, I think, stepped down. But at the time, I think his annual bonus was $160 million. And she calculated that he could personally pay from his bonus a 15% annual pay increase to every single employee at Disney, in the parks, at Disneyland, Disney World. And still he would have made $30 million instead of the 160. And I just,
Crazy.
you know, it was just an interesting contrast. But look, I mean, it as I said, for me, it's great to hear people like you, Jeffrey, talking about it. And I think this idea of pick a side, I mean, it sounds so simple and so clear, and yet people are, and you know, kudos to you for actually picking both sides, right? I mean, not playing both sides, but picking Patagonia on one side, Chick-fil-A on the other, going, you know, I don't care what your point of view is, but you have one, and I respect you for having one. I mean,
and you should.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the ones that sit there and say we shouldn't do that. That's the problem. I mean, that's the real issue. And that's the ones that are passing out the kind of bonuses and doing the kind of things that they should. Because I'll guarantee you, Chick-fil-A takes care of their people, and their people love them.
Yeah.
Their people absolutely love them. And, you know, and yet I wouldn't espouse the same kind of values they've got, but they got their own values. It's what it works for them. And the same thing holds with the Patagonia or Starbucks. If you want to use Starbucks example as well, you know, they shut down for a day to overcome what they do.
So,
guys, I'm sorry, but I got to run. I'm like late for another big appointment.
No, it's fine. It's 3:30. I just want to thank you. This was fun. I'll be in touch regarding the other conversation, and hopefully see you
I'll follow
Sunday.
up on that too, Joseph. I'll get you a note out, and then I've already sent you the Scotch thing, and the Scotch thing's up here too. If you guys want to join us, you're welcome.
That's awesome.
Good.